So, a new Goosebumps video game has been released, but is it good or bad? And does it have anything to do with Goosebumps? Or do they just slap the logo on the cover to sell a few more copies? Well, I played through the game, and I'm going to be answering all of that. Now, the game is called Goosebumps Terror in Little Creek. When I saw the trailer, I have to admit, I wasn't excited about the game. I love Goosebumps, but this just didn't look like it had anything to do with the franchise. There's never been a place called Little Creek in any of the Goosebumps books, or anything, so I was pretty confident the game would have an original story and characters. I was somewhat right, but I was caught off guard by the direction they took and how the creators connected Terror in Little Creek to the Goosebumps franchise. The best way for me to explain that, however, is to give you a complete plot synopsis. If you plan on playing the game and don't want it spoiled, skip to this point in the video. With that, here's the story of Goosebumps Terror in Little Creek. At the start of the game, we're introduced to the main character, Sloane. She lives in the quiet town of Little Creek and is who you, the player, control. Recently, the Little Creek police have instituted a mandatory curfew. They won't explain why they are doing that, but residents have reported seeing and hearing strange things around town, including noises coming from the library. As the game begins, Sloane sneaks out of her house to meet up with her friends outside the library. From there, we're introduced to Harvey and twin sisters Lizzie and Lydia. The four friends decide to figure out what's really going on and sneak inside the library to hopefully find some answers. Once inside, they bump into Mrs. Schneal, the new librarian. She questions why these four kids are out past curfew and instructs them to go home. Still, Mrs. Schneal admits that there have been some unsettling sights at the church and graveyard. Of course, the four kids don't go home, and in fact, they decide to split up, with Sloane heading to the graveyard to investigate. There, she bumps into Police Officer Pickett. Sloane asks him what's going on, but of course, Officer Pickett has nothing to share. Despite being told again to go back home, Sloane and her friends continue to investigate. Sloane discovers two pieces, one in the graveyard and one by the church, both of which are bearing the same strange symbol. Communicating via walkie-talkies, Sloane suggests to her friends that they take them back to the librarian, Mrs. Schneal, and see if she recognizes the symbol. However, Sloane hears nothing back from Harvey, Lizzie, or Lydia. Concerned that something might have happened to them, Sloane returns to the library. Once she gets there though, Sloane can't get into Schneal's office. She begins exploring the library and finds a monster wandering about. Sloane manages to get away from the creature and then bumps into Mrs. Schneal. The librarian says that she saw the monster too and that she recognizes the symbol that Sloane found. Mrs. Schneal reveals that the symbol belongs to the Monster Society, a group of conspiracy theorists who meet regularly at the library. Sloane suspects the Monster Society might be involved in her friend's disappearances and decides to investigate. Mrs. Schneal begrudgingly gives Sloane a key to get into the archives, the area of the library where the Monster Society meets. Schneal also tells Sloane to grab a special book that's down there called the Haunted Book, as it might be useful for them to have, you know, with the monsters wandering about and all. Sloane makes it into the archives, where she learns absolutely nothing about the disappearance of her friends or anything about the Monster Society. She does, however, feel a strange book calling to her. It turns out this is the haunted book that Mrs. Schneal had told her about. Sloane takes the book, which gives her supernatural abilities that allow her to reveal hidden paths, among other things. Sloane bumps into the same monster from earlier, but manages to get away and leave the library. Once outside, she gets a call from Harvey, as well as Lizzie and Lydia. They don't explain what happened to them, but they tell Sloane to meet them. Harvey is at the theater, while Lizzie and Lydia are at the museum. Sloane notices they sound a bit odd, but doesn't think too much about it. It's up to you which place you want to go to first, but I went to the museum. Once Sloane gets to the museum, she meets up with Lizzie and Lydia. They are obviously possessed, but Sloane just thinks they're goofing off. The twins say that the answers Sloane seeks are found deep in the museum. Sloane keeps exploring, but first bumps into Officer Pickett, the cop from the graveyard. Sloane asks him if he knows anything about the Monster Society, but he refuses to answer, just telling her to get back home. Sloane doesn't do that, and instead finds Lizzie and Lydia in some kind of ancient Egyptian exhibit in the basement of the museum. There, the sisters instruct Sloane to use the haunted book, which causes a mummy named Atsu to come to life. The mummy has it out for Sloane, but she manages to escape. Once she's safe, Sloane meets up with Lizzie and Lydia. Big shocker, but Sloane finally realizes that the sisters are possessed after she notices they're each wearing one half of an Egyptian scarab pendant. Basically, the spirit inside the pendant has possessed them, so Sloane finds an ancient Egyptian scarab and Lizzie and Lydia return to their normal selves. With that done, Sloane heads to the theater and meets up with Harvey. A play called The Phantom is being performed at the theater. Not the Phantom of the Auditorium, just the Phantom. Once inside, Sloane meets up with Harvey. He believes he has discovered a ritual embedded in the play. He instructs Sloane to find the Phantom's mask and place it on a mannequin that's on the stage. Sloane basically acknowledges this will bring the Phantom to life, but Harvey seems into it, so Sloane does it. Like at the museum, Sloane finds Officer Pickett again. Unlike last time, we actually get some information from him. While he isn't part of the Monster Society, Pickett is doing an investigation on their behalf and collecting evidence for them. He adds that they are good people, helping protect Little Creek, which is a much different description from what Mrs. Schneal said. After that, Sloane finds the Phantom's mask, and, using the haunted book and the ritual Harvey gave her, the Phantom is brought to life. The Phantom, of course, chases after Sloane, but she gets away. While escaping, she finds a mirror with Harvey inside it. It turns out that wasn't the real Harvey that Sloane met when she first entered the theater, which explains why he suggested Sloane bring the Phantom to life. Anyways, Sloane uses the power of the haunted book to get the real Harvey out of the mirror. After that, the four friends meet up and reiterate what's going on. Monsters are real, they're all over Little Creek, and a group called the Monster Society, which may or may not be evil, is somehow involved. Sloane's friends also share that, while they were waiting for her, Officer Pickett passed by and accidentally dropped a flash drive. On one side of the drive, it says EM and ES, and on the other, property of the Monster Society. With more questions than answers, the group decides to split up. Because it was clearly such a good idea last time, Sloane is going to find out what's on the flash drive, while Harvey, Lizzie, and Lydia are going to tell Mrs. Schneal what has happened and see if she can help. Sloane heads to the computer lab at the library and searches the flash drive. She discovers that the Monster Society's purpose is to protect people from monsters, confirming that the group is good, like Officer Pickett said. Sloane also discovers that the Monster Society has been gathering information on a Mortman family. The Mortmans are a family of shape-shifting monsters with a love of literature and a colorful appetite. In case you need any confirmation, this is the same Mortman family that Mr. Mortman, the evil librarian from The Girl Who Cried Monster, is from. Sloane also discovers something else. Mr. Mortman had a niece, Evelyn Mortman, E.M., but after getting married, she became Evelyn Schneal, E.S. As you can probably put together, Mrs. Schneal, the librarian, is a monster. Her uncle was Mr. Mortman. Sloane realizes the danger her friends are in and tries to warn them, but it's too late. I'm so glad they decided to split up again. Anyways, Mrs. Schneal locks Sloane up, and we find out that Mrs. Schneal has been behind everything. She was the monster Sloane spotted in the library, and she possessed Harvey, Lizzie, and Lydia, using them to trick Sloane into bringing the Phantom and the Mummy to life. It's still not clear why Mrs. Schneal is doing this, but all Schneal says is that she's waiting for Sloane's parents to arrive. We don't know what Mrs. Schneal has in store for them, but regardless, Sloane breaks out and escapes from the library. Conveniently, Harvey, Lizzie, and Lydia also manage to escape, and the four friends meet up and formulate a plan. The group first figures out how to defeat each monster using the information left by the Monster Society. They then go out and do it, defeating both the Phantom and the Mummy. And by they, I mean Sloane. During this part of the game, there isn't much story, but there is one very important detail. After defeating both the Phantom and the Mummy, you have the chance to either lay them to rest or absorb their powers. Essentially, there are two choices, one good and one bad, but how they affect the story will become apparent later. In the meantime, with those two monsters defeated, Sloane and her friends head back to the library to finish off Mrs. Schneal. While exploring, Sloane finds some more information from the Monster Society. This reveals they've been watching another monster family, the Dark family. You may remember that Lucy Dark was the protagonist in The Girl Who Cried Monster. The twist of that book was that Lucy and her family were all monsters, and they ate Mr. Mortman. Why is this a big deal? Well, Sloane's mother is Lucy Dark, meaning that Sloane is a monster. This revelation rightfully freaks Sloane out, but ultimately her friends stand by her and say, as long as she doesn't turn evil or anything, she'll still be their friend. With that taken care of, Sloane faces off against Mrs. Schneal. Using a weapon the Monster Society created, Sloane is able to defeat Schneal and finally get some answers. Schneal reveals she was very close to her uncle, Mr. Mortman, so when he was eaten alive at the end of The Girl Who Cried Monster by Sloane's grandparents, Schneal wanted to bring him back and get revenge. Her plan was to use the haunted book, which Mr. Mortman had given her, to try and bring him back. However, the book didn't like her, but another monster might have better luck using it. That's why Mrs. Schneal had Sloane get a hold of it. Her plan was to have Sloane resurrect the Phantom and the Mummy and use one more ritual to bring her uncle, Mr. Mortman, back to life. From there, Schneal and Mortman would get revenge on Sloane and her parents. Now, you remember, after fighting the Phantom and the Mummy, there were those two choices, a good one and a bad one. Well, This is when those decisions matter. If you choose the good options, then Sloane snakes some kind of statue from Mrs. Schneal and uses it to command the monsters. Sloane orders them to drag Schneal away in return to where they came from, wherever that is. Afterward, Sloane gives a little epilogue and everyone lives happily ever after. Or do they? This is supposed to be the good ending, but it's kind of creepy. Like, what did those monsters do to Mrs. Schneal? If that's the quote-unquote happy ending, what's the bad one? Well, after defeating Schneal, the monster in Sloane comes out, and she eats Mrs. Schneal. Sloane's friends run away from her, but it gets even darker. After leaving the library, Sloane walks out and bumps into Officer Pickett. He says he's taking Sloane and her family in for questioning, but then Sloane eats him too. Wow, a Goosebumps story with a body count. Between the two endings, I prefer the evil one the best. There aren't many Goosebumps stories where the protagonist becomes evil, and I feel like this ending is more in line with the ending to The Girl Who Cried Monster. There's something gross, but kind of poetic with both Mr. Mortman and his niece being eaten by a member of the Dark family. But, overall, is the story of Goosebumps Terror in Little Creek good or bad? It's honestly a mixed bag. For instance, I think the dialogue between the characters is good, especially the way they interact with each other and how they react to the situations around them. The voice acting is actually one of my favorite parts of this game, especially Sloane. There was an energy and passion to the performance that I really liked, and it made playing through the game more enjoyable.
We're way past that point, Mr. Schneal! You've gotta help me! You saw it too, right? The monster? I mean, how could you not? It was right there! But monsters aren't real, right? I mean, how could they be?
Now, I said I like the dialogue, but the writing isn't perfect. Sometimes it fails to explain what's actually happening. For instance, at the start of the game, Sloane says she's meeting everyone at Harvey's house. However, you then have to go to the library and there's no explanation given. I'm not sure if it's poor writing or if a section of the game got cut, but it's confusing. There are other parts of the game where things just aren't explained that well. In fact, for writing the plot summary, I had to go back and rewatch the footage because I wasn't exactly sure how and why everything happened. Regarding the story, the presentation of the game is somewhat lacking. The characters don't have a wide range of expressions, so sometimes what they're saying doesn't exactly match up with the expression on their face.
Whatever I've gained from this awfulness, I hope it's worth it.
Now, with all that said, I did like that there was a direct connection to Goosebumps, with the game acting as kind of a sequel to The Girl Who Cried Monster. I do wish there was a bit more, however. It would have been cool if you got to meet Lucy Dark, or if Mr. Mortman actually appeared. It's probably just the Goosebumps fan in me, but I would have loved if in addition to all the new characters, we got some of the original ones too. With that said, I'm glad with what we got, and there are a few references to the broader Goosebumps world. For instance, you find a letter that references Freddy Martinez and recounts the events in the book Vampire Breath. There are smaller references too, like occasionally a lawn gnome will pop up that you can shoot at, obviously a reference to Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes. As I mentioned at the start of the video, one of the things I, along with others, was wondering was whether this game would actually feel like a Goosebumps game or just be Goosebumps in name only. To me, it does just enough to feel like a Goosebumps game, so it passes that test. I should also discuss the graphics, as this was something fans were questioning. Terror in Little Creek has a cartoon-like appearance, which I can see being a turn-off for some Goosebumps fans, especially when considering the original Goosebumps book covers. For me, it didn't bug me a ton because this is Goosebumps and it's not meant to be intense adult horror. However, I wouldn't have minded if the art style had just a bit more of an edge to it. I don't love Terror in Little Creek's art style, but it didn't distract or hurt my enjoyment of the game either. Speaking of the game, let's talk about that. Is Terror in Little Creek actually fun to play? Well, there are 3 different types of gameplay: sneaking around, puzzle solving, and, to a lesser extent, combat. Let's go over them one by one. Early on, you get a slingshot. In addition to helping solve puzzles, you could also use it to shoot at enemies. However, the regular pellets are pretty weak. There are stronger ones, but there are only so many, and once you run out, you're out. Additionally, the larger monsters cannot be killed, they can only be stunned. Basically, what I'm saying is, yes, you can kill enemies, but I often find it easier to just not engage with them at all. That's where the stealth element of this game comes in. In addition to just not being seen by them, there are also a lot of places you can hide. I don't hate this style of gameplay, but stealth is never my favorite, just because you end up spending a lot of time waiting. It makes sense for a Goosebumps game, so I'm not upset by that, but I never went, oh boy, I get to crouch down and hide. Now, the other big element to Terror in Little Creek is the puzzle solving, and there's a good variety of puzzles. Sometimes it's as simple as just hitting a weather vane with a slingshot. Other times, you gotta do math using an ancient Egyptian calculator. The variety of puzzles was good, but what made it hard to enjoy them was the previously mentioned monsters. I'd be looking around the area to figure out what I needed to do, but at the same time, I'd have to be careful not to get spotted. I get that's what makes it challenging, but it was more of an annoyance. With that said, I thought the puzzles were enjoyable, and it was satisfying to use the clues to piece everything together. Now, something else about the game I didn't like was the running around. The map is that awkward size, where it's not big enough for the game to give you a fast travel option, but it's also not small enough that getting from one place to another is a breeze. This was probably the most annoying part of Terror in Little Creek. I hated when I would run over to one part of the map, only to realize I actually needed to be on the other side. You do literally unlock doors along the way that act as kind of shortcuts, but they only help out so much. With all that said, I think the gameplay is fine. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it fits as a Goosebumps game. If it sounds like I had more negative things to say than positive, part of that can be attributed to me playing through the whole thing in one sitting. There were parts where I was ready for a break, but I wanted to get this video done as soon as possible. Now, with that said, the game is pretty short. I would say, depending on your skill level, you could probably beat this game in 4 to 8 hours. There also isn't much replayability, other than if you want to get both endings. So, overall, is Goosebumps Terror in Little Creek good or bad? Well, there isn't much that the game does particularly well, with the exception of the voice acting. But on the other hand, there isn't much that's really bad. The game is just mediocre, which I guess you could argue makes it bad. Here is what I will say though. I went into Terror in Little Creek feeling this was a Goosebumps game in name only. While I would have preferred more Goosebumpsness, the game did give me just enough to feel like an actual Goosebumps game. Plus, it was a fun surprise discovering how they connected this game to the established Goosebumps universe. Now, in addition to this video game, there's also a new line of Goosebumps action figures, but how do they compare to the 90s versions? To find out which figures are better, watch the video on screen.